what mystics and prophets revealed about hyperdimensional entities. It's a spiritual war. Hyperdimensional entities have been recognized, discussed, and warned about for literally millennia throughout the history of humanity. Naturally, there are many people who scoff at the very idea of such beings, believing them to be fictitious inventions of the human mind. However, the fact that so many cultures, traditions, religions, and spiritualities have discussed the nature of these creatures using different terms, but essentially describing the same thing, gives credence to the idea that they do exist. We have been cautioned for millennia that humanity is under psychic attack by a group of energetic, discarnate beings that seed thoughts of judgment, separation, anxiety, anger, and fear in order to generate loosh, that's negative emotional energy, that they siphon off as food. In searching for what force is really behind the construction of the New World Order and the grander conspiracy, one is bound to investigate these hyperdimensional entities who may be the original handlers, puppet masters, and mind control perpetrators manipulating the whole of mankind. Beyond the frequency band of normal perception, we have to take seriously the idea that the hidden rulers of this crazy world are invisible, or at least operate from frequencies beyond normal perception. After all, no one knows exactly from where thoughts originate. If there were a force that could control which thoughts are beamed into our minds, then every single living person would be vulnerable to psychic attack. These hyperdimensional entities are said to be able to infiltrate your mind, make their voice sound like yours, and entice you to do their bidding, all with the aim of generating fear, which is their food. Are they the gods of yore that demanded sacrifice? Are they the evil spirits that possess people? Are they the masters of trickery who continually try to keep us in fear and out of our center of power, our heart? What follows is a list of 10 different traditions and cultures that describe these hyperdimensional entities using their own terms and ideas. 1. Hyperdimensional entities, the archons, according to Gnosticism. The ancient Gnostics were named after gnosis, or the Greek word for knowledge or insight. Gnosticism was a loosely organized religious and philosophical movement that flourished in the 1st and 2nd centuries AD. The Gnostics believed that the material world was a result of a primordial error on the part of a divine being, usually called wisdom or logos. That's to their description of this. They attributed the creation and control of the material world to a semi-divine, ignorant creature known who was called Saklas, or the fool, Lal Debath, the blind god, or the demiurge, from the Greek demiurgos, which means craftsman or creator, but which the Gnostics meant as the architect or lesser creative force. In Gnostic mythology, cosmology, both Sophia and demiurge are subordinate to the supreme being, cosmos, or God. The demiurge was antagonistic to anything spiritual and had a group of servants known as the archons, Greek meaning ruler or boss. Now, the research of Gnostic scholar John Lash reveals that the Gnostics were early mystic shamans who reached high states of consciousness, knew their direct connection with the cosmos, and honored the importance of the female principle, Sophia meaning wisdom, to live balanced lives. He concludes that the Catholic Church feared their power, so it killed them and banished the survivors underground. The Dead Sea Scrolls discovered in Qumran, Palestine, and the Nag Hammadi codices discovered in Egypt, both in the 1940s, are important Gnostic texts which expose the truth about the archons. And here is a quote from the Apocryphon of John, a Nag Hammadi text. Quote, "They sought to overpower humanity in its psychological and perceptual functions, although they saw that human thinking was superior to theirs, for indeed their delight is bitter and their beauty is depraved, and their triumph is in deception." Apaton, meaning they try to trick you. Leading astray, for their own structure is without divinity. End quote. The Gnostics were postulating the idea of a predatory alien presence that took delight in others' pain and that used deception as a tool. Disconnected from their own power, without divinity, they became parasites that had to hijack the energy of others to survive. 2. Hyperdimensional entities, demons in Christianity, and they do exist just like God's angels exist. Now, these same forces are called demons in the Christian tradition. In this famous quote from Ephesians 6:12, the creatures are actually called rulers and authorities, which directly echoes the language used to describe the archons, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the Nag Hammadi texts. For our struggle, quote, for our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms, end quote. Christianity also contains a tradition of exorcism of evil spirits. Yes, and there are prayers against that, and they do work. Now, the gospel contains many stories of Jesus casting out the evil spirits, and this tradition continues to the current day. Father Gabriel Amorth was a former official in the Vatican who served as exorcist for the Diocese of Rome for 30 years. He was also the founder of the International Association of Exorcists. Number 3, hyperdimensional entities, jinn, in Arabian mythology. The jinn, the genie in the bottle. Yes, the jinn or the genie in the bottle, as we know. In pre-Islamic Arabia, before the rise of the Prophet Muhammad in the 6th century AD, Arabian mythology contains reference to the jinn or the djinn, D-J-I-N-N, who were considered to be supernatural spirits and could be good or bad. Jinn is a classification of a number of different types of supernatural beings. The book, The Evolution of the Concept of the Jinn from Pre-Islam to Islam, describes how they could appear as pure spiritual beings, or angels or demons, as indicated by Ibn Amzur in Lisan al-Arab. Quote, the people of the Jahiliyyah called angels, peace be upon them, jinn, because they were invisible from sight, end quote. They could also be tangible creatures, particularly with animal-like characteristics, as stated by the Encyclopedia of Religion and Ethics. Quote, were not pure spirits, for they were often represented as hairy and often as having the form of an ostrich or a snake, end quote. The book mentions 4 specific types of jinn in the pre-Islamic world. One is the ghoul. We get the English word ghoul from this. The ghouls were desert demons believed to rob graves and devour corpses. They seem to appear in many different forms, often animalistic. They could appear and disappear like the light of a torch. They left a physical corpse behind when killed, thus the poem by Tabata Sharan. Quote, I spent the night leaning on her, waiting for the morning to see what I caught. Then I found 2 eyes and an ugly head, similar to the head of a cat with a forked tongue, end quote. 2 is Sila. The difference between this and the former is not clear to me. They seem to be more sneaky and clever. A story exists of one marrying and bearing human children. Possible other differences may be that they are active during the day instead of at night, or that the Shila is female and the ghoul male. Neither seems to be universally respected, though. Number 3 is the sheik. This was a man with only half of a body who would beat a human to death if encouraged. This is according to Al-Jahiz. Quote, there the sheik appeared to him. He had only 1 hand, 1 eye, 1 leg. They recited poetry to each other, and they hit each other, and both of them fell dead. 4. Shaitan. And this will be expanded upon below. The English word Satan is derived from the Arabic word. They were noted for being smart, cunning, powerful, and generally rebellious. Number 4, the hyperdimensional entities of Shaitan or Satan in Islam. Although the Shaitan, plural Shaitanin, belongs to pre-Islamic Arabian mythology, the fact that Muhammad was tricked by one and spoke openly of it was elevated the characters to Islamic lore. In the Quran, there is a story of Iblis, the first Shaitan, who was apparently made by Allah, God, from a fire so pure that not even smoke could mar its beauty. This is interesting because reference to the archons is made from smokeless fire crops up repeatedly across different traditions. Iblis refused to bow to Adam, who was, after all, a mere man made of clay, so Allah banished him from heaven. Iblis swore to take revenge on Adam and all clay men like him. Iblis is considered the lord of all shaitanin and is said to have gathered an army of shaitanin and jinn to persecute mankind. A shaitan is described as a sweeping force and a whispering voice, visible only to donkeys who bray desperate warnings when they see it approaching. This again is noteworthy since this highlights the theme that these hyperdimensional entities are outside the normal range of normal human perception, but not outside the perception of other creatures, such as animals like donkeys or cats, and not outside the range of human perception when a person, through will, intent, or even psychedelics, or even after God's grace to be able to do so, expands his or her perception range. 5. Hyperdimensional entities host hostile forces, Sri Aurobindo, the mother Rudolf Steiner. Sri Aurobindo was an Indian sage who founded literal yoga, integral yoga. He wrote about the archons using the term hostile forces. Quote, in the adverse force is the power that keeps up ignorance and darkness in the world. It can only be destroyed when mankind is no longer in love with ignorance and darkness. Each sadhak has to push it out of contact with his being. When it has gone from him, then there will be no longer any serious difficulties in his sadhana, in his practice. The hostile forces are powers of darkness, who are in revolt against the light and the truth, and want to keep this world under their rule in darkness and ignorance. Whenever anyone wants to reach the truth, to realize the divine, they stand in the way as much as possible. Sometimes they possess men in order to act through them. Sometimes they take birth in a human body. When their use in the play is over, they will either change or disappear or no longer seek to intervene in the earth play. End quote. The mother, a woman closely associated with Sri Aurobindo, and his work talks about it here in the elucidates upon spirit possession or demonic possession. Question. When a being is possessed by a hostile force, what becomes of his psyche, his soul? Mother, it depends on the degree of the possession. Usually it is something progressive. First, there is an influence under which one comes. The second, the influence becomes permanent, and there is one part of the being which deteriorates, which is constantly under this influence and expresses it. After this, the being which has cast this influence tries to enter that part. Then, usually, this produces a conflict, a kind of inner battle. If one does not know how to resist and does not succeed in shaking off the hold, then gradually the being that has seized upon a part of that person acts like an octopus and spreads its tentacles like that, slowly and everywhere, and finally it is a total possession. At the moment of the total possession, either the possessed person becomes completely unbalanced or he becomes a kind of monster, end quote. In other words, he loses his senses. Rudolf Steiner is known for many things, including his revolutionary ideas about education. He too was aware of the archons. He said, there are beings in the spiritual realms for whom anxiety and fear emanate from human beings offer welcome food. When humans have no anxiety and fear, then these creatures starve. If fear and anxiety radiates from people and they break out in panic, then these creatures find welcome nutrition and they become more and more powerful. These beings are hostile towards humanity. Everything that feeds on negative feeling, on anxiety, fear, and superstition, despair, or doubt, are in reality hostile forces in supersensible worlds, launching cruel attacks on human beings while they are being fed. Therefore, it is above all necessary to begin with that the person who enters the spiritual world overcomes fear, feelings of helplessness, despair, and anxiety. Because these are exactly the feelings that belong to contemporary culture and materialism, because it estranges people from the spiritual world. It's especially suited to evoke hopelessness and fear of the unknown in people, thereby calling upon the above-mentioned hostile forces against them, end quote. 6. Hyperdimensional entities, cosmic predator, Mud Shadow Shamanic a la Castaneda. Don Juan, a character in the series of books by Carlos Castaneda, famously made mention of the cosmic predator, the Mud Shadow, that fed off mankind's emotional energy, and some people may perceive it as something akin to a gargoyle. Now, out of all the descriptions of hyperdimensional entities thus far presented, the descriptions given by Carlos Castaneda in his 12th and final book, The Active Side of Infinity, are the most disturbing for me personally. I still remember reading it in my early 20s and being shocked to my core. Some parts of me knew it was deeply true, and it rendered anything else I had learned in my life up until that point as irrelevant and meaningless, because this was, without doubt, where the real battle lay. Castaneda relates what his mentor Don Juan taught him about the archons, which he called the cosmic predator and the mud shadow. Quote, "We have a predator that came from the depths of the cosmos and took over the rule of our lives. Human beings are its prisoners. The predator, with a capital P, is our Lord and Master, and it has rendered us docile, helpless. If we want to protest, it suppresses our protests. If we want to act independently, it demands that we don't do so. This was an energetic fact for the sorcerers of ancient Mexico. They took us over because we were food for them, and they squeeze us mercilessly because we are their sustenance. Just as we rear chickens in chicken coops, the predators rear us in human coops, humaneros, therefore their food is always available to them. Humaneros, therefore their food is always available to them," end quote. Sorcerers, he said, believe that the predators have given us our systems of belief, our ideas of good and evil or social mores. They are the ones who set up our hopes and expectations and dreams of success or failure. They have given us covetousness, greed, and cowardice. It is the predators who make us complacent, routinary, and egomaniacal. In order to keep us obedient and meek and weak, the predators engage themselves in a stupendous maneuver, stupendous, of course, from the point of view of fighting strategists, a horrendous maneuver from the point of view of those who suffer it. They gave us their mind. Do you hear me? The predators gave us their mind, which becomes our mind. The predator's mind is baroque, contradictory, morose, filled with the fear of being discovered any minute now. Through the mind, which after all is their mind, the predators inject into the lives of human beings whatever is convenient for them, and they ensure in this manner a degree of security to act as a buffer against their fear. The sorcerers of ancient Mexico were quite ill at ease with the idea when the predator made its appearance on earth. They reasoned that man must have been a complete being at one point, with stupendous insights, feats, and awareness that are mythological legends nowadays, and then everything seems to disappear, and we have now a sedated man. What I'm saying is that what we have against us is not a simple predator. It is very smart and organized. It follows a mythological system to render us useless. Man, the magical being that he is destined to be, is no longer magical. He's an average piece of meat. End quote. The Mud Shadow explains the seemingly irreconcilable difference between man and the genius engineer and man and the stupid idiot. The cosmic predator uses man as food, but in order to get the most louche he can, he has to whip up man into a negative frenzy, much as farmers fatten their chickens and cattle before killing them. Don Juan specifically explains that every human has a glowing coat of awareness upon which the predator feeds. It milks man by provoking emotional drama so as to generate flashes of awareness that it then eats. In other places in the Castaneda book series, Don Juan describes the Mud Shadow as a foreign installation and even hints that certain shamans or sorcerers have seen the creature or creatures. Gurdjieff told the story of the evil magician. Number 7. Hyperdimensional entities, the evil magician Gurdjieff. The Russian mystic George Gurdjieff echoed the same idea of man being a dulled creature robbed of his powers. Gurdjieff believed most people lived their lives in a kind of hypnotic trance or waking sleep. He illustrated this in his story of the evil magician. Quote, there was an evil magician. He lived deep in the mountains and the forests, and he had thousands of sheep. But the problem was that the sheep were afraid of the magician because every day the sheep were seeing that one of them was being killed for his breakfast, another was being killed for his lunch, so they ran away from the magician's ranch, and it was a difficult job to find them in the vast forest. Being a magician, he used his magic. He hypnotized all the sheep and suggested to them, first of all, that they were immortal and that no harm was being done to them when they were skinned, that, on the contrary, it would be very good for them and even pleasant. Secondly, he suggested that the magician was a good master who loved his flock so much that he was ready to do anything in the world for them. And in the third place, he suggested to them that if anything at all were going to happen to them, it was not going to happen just then, at any rate, not that day, and therefore that they had no need to think about it. He then told different sheep, to some, you are a man, you need not be afraid. It is only the sheep who are going to be killed and eaten, not you. You are a man just like I am. Some other sheep were told, you are a lion, only sheep are afraid. They escape, they are cowards, you are a lion, you would prefer to die than to run away. You don't belong to these sheep. So when they are killed, it's not your problem. They are meant to be killed, but you are the most loved of my friends in this forest, end quote. And in this way, he told every sheep different stories, and from the second day, the sheep stopped running away from the house. They still saw other sheep being killed, butchered, but it was not their concern. Somebody was a lion, somebody was a tiger, somebody was a man, somebody was a magician, and so forth. Nobody was a sheep except the one who was being killed. This way, without keeping servants, he managed thousands of sheep. They would go into the forest for their food, for their water, and they would come back home, believing always one thing. It is some sheep who is going to be killed, not you. You don't belong to the sheep. You are a lion, respected, honored, a friend of the great magician, end quote. The magician's problems were solved, and the sheep never ran away again. Gurdjieff believed humanity is not only like a flock of sheep, but also food for the moon, a concept which is well explained in the link here. Quote, in the fourth way cosmology, creation proceeds outward and downward from a central point, called the Sun Absolute. Creation passes through multiple levels known as cosmi or worlds, and finally reaches a level corresponding to Earth. Due to special cosmic circumstances, organic life on Earth is necessary for receiving this energy of creation, transforming this into a form that is passed further along to feed the moon, which is said to be growing. Quote, all this is seen as a natural process where organic Earth life, including man, performs a function in a cosmic organism, a little like bacteria perform a function in the human digestive system. The fact of mankind collectively being required to produce certain vibrations or energies for serving various cosmic purposes is stressed throughout George Gurdjieff's Beelzebub's tales to his grandson. So-called planetary influences cause mankind to fight wars and endure cataclysms so that a certain quota of energy released be fulfilled and the moon fed, quote unquote. The ideas of a predator eating our awareness and food for the moon are all synonymous. 8. Hyperdimensional entities. Native American Indian Wetiko. In slight contrast to the view of the archons as presented in the works of Castaneda and elsewhere, the Native American Indian traditions conceived hyperdimensional entities as a mind virus, which they called Wetiko. In an earlier article, Mind versus Wetiko, Collective Shadow of Humanity, I expanded upon the idea of Wetiko and the shadow as explained by brilliant psychologist Carl Jung. The Wetiko is based in the unconsciousness of collective psyche. Quote, Wetiko is a master of distraction, making us look outside of ourselves and find issues and problems there rather than looking within. We find people or groups outside of ourselves that match our projection of evil or darkness, then falsely believe the darkness is only outside of ourselves. This becomes a self-perpetuating feedback loop where we become unwitting propagators of Wetiko. Paul suggests that whether we look at Wetiko as a cunning enemy out to destroy us or a cheeky challenger out to prod and poke us into a fuller awareness, it's a matter of perspective. Obviously, it's more empowering to view the created situations and outcomes of the mind versus its virus as gifts rather than as curses or burdens, because the former view may spur us on to become better people, while the latter may lead us to anger and hate. We do at least have that much choice, but unless we are already a fully awakened or enlightened individual, we do not yet have the choice of whether to invite Wetiko into our lives or not. It's already here, and it's not going away unless every last speck of shadow is fully acknowledged. End quote. From this perspective, the hyperdimensional entities are part of a single mind virus which tries to trick us at every turn, causing us to see problems in other psychological projection in others when really the problems originate in ourselves. Other references to hyperdimensional entities? The list above is not complete, for there are many other traditions which speak of the same basic idea. The concept of Maya in Hinduism and samsara in Buddhism describe the state of being lost in the illusion of the shadow or being led around by temptation and seduction due to the archonic influence. According to Bernard Gunther, there are other references to hyperdimensional entities, such as Lords of Destiny in Hermeticism and the General Law esoteric Christianity. Now, how do extraterrestrials fit into all of this? At this point, the overwhelming evidence for the existence of aliens or ETs, extraterrestrials, must be mentioned, especially for the Greys and reptilians. It is unclear where these beings are the same thing as the archons who are not physical, or whether they are physical and therefore subject to psychic attacks by the archons just as mankind is, though I tend to believe the latter. There are many different whistleblowers who claim to have had physical interactions with Greys and reptilians, and you could read some of them here in the links, including Phil Schneider, Niara Isley, Nadira Durham, Barbara Lamb, and many others. There is also the idea put forth by many, such as Whitley Strieber, that hostile ATs engaging in producing an alien-human hybrid race through genetic engineering cannot physically experience Earth in their own bodies, so they appear to be trying to experience through others. This idea suggests there is something different, non-corporeal, or ethereal about these ETs, just as there is undoubtedly is with the archons. They can't cross dimensions. However, more research needs to be done in this area. One final note on this aspect of the topic. A common theme among stories about hyperdimensional entities and reptilians is that there is some kind of channel between which is being opened, especially during a ritual, and this channel is a two-way street. The possessing force takes over the vessel's thoughts, words, and actions to some degree, while the possessed gets to use borrowed energy and feels a dark rush or adrenaline high. The main point of this demonic possession is so that the hyperdimensional entity can cross over dimensions more easily into this world. This is very important to remember when looking at the sexual and sacrificial rituals performed by the elite in places like Bohemian Grove. David Icke's take on this: while archons can come into our reality, it takes so much energy for them to remain in our frequency band that they can't stay very long. So they have possessed the elite New World Order families, who are essentially archon families, who channel them and bring about their agenda on Earth. Now beware the fake light. There is much evidence that it is the archons who are behind the fake light of the New Age movement and possible light trap at the point of death, with the ubiquitous divide and rule strategy we see everywhere in the push towards New World Order. This topic is too big to go into here. But I will briefly quote Cameron Daly, quote, "In order to capture and control the widest possible spectrum of souls, the corrupt demiurge split its agents into two seemingly opposing teams, dark versus false light. What matters most to the demiurge is that we worship it or one of its agents, regardless if they are on the light team or the dark team. The corrupt demiurge is an entropic system of artificially induced separation, consciousness that is slowly dying, and it depends on harvesting the energy from the souls incarnated within its system in order to preserve its existence. final thoughts. Even though there is a lot of evidence for the existence of archons, we have to consider the possibility that we may be anthropomorphizing them. Perhaps they are actual creatures, or perhaps they are symbolic representations of our shadows, our wounds, and our fears. Either way, when those tempting, seductive, and tormenting thoughts arrive in your head, as happens to every human on the planet, you have a very real battle in front of you and inside you, and that much we can say for sure. And when this is my comment, when these thoughts come into your mind, you have to get them out. Just say, "Get behind me, Satan," or "Our Lord Jesus Christ, take away this evil entity that is bothering me now." Now it says here, I will end this series by suggesting the following ways you can confront and overcome the hyperdimensional entity so that you are no longer their prisoner, although this work may take an entire lifetime. Name the demon. Once you take responsibility or own a part of your shadow or unconscious behavior, it loses grip on you. This is especially powerful when done semi-publicly in front of a safe group of people you trust. Next, integrate, don't obliterate. From a spiritual and psychological perspective, overcoming the shadow is all about integration, not obliteration. You can't destroy the dark side, since it will always be there as a part of the whole, in contrast to love, so that we can know what love truly is. The spiritual path is about healing whatever split we hold within by integrating the disassociation parts of ourselves into a fully aware whole. Be the observer and watcher. Develop a practice by watching the voices inside of your head so that you don't identify with them. The only way that you can actually have power over you is by tricking you into identifying with a certain mental position. Next, do your inner work. The battle is within. Focus on what's inside of you. It's hard to save the world or effectively help others if you are haunted by past wounds that you have not healed. Next, worry about your own shadow, not others. We all know it's far easier to see the shadow in others than ourselves, but each person can only heal themselves. Next, revoke all agreements, contracts with the negative hyperdimensional entities. With power, certainty, and authority, state that you are canceling, revoking any and all agreements with any hyperdimensional entities you believe have a hold over you. Next, sharpen your intuition and your discernment. The more you connect with your intuition, gut heart, and not your reason or mind, the more you'll know rather than try to figure out. Your intuition will help you discern which voice is real and which voices are tricking you. It will also help you discern truth from falsehood as a reader and researcher. The truth is never just handed to you on a golden platter. You have to struggle and sweat for it. So next, find the place of invulnerability and power inside you. As Paul Levy says, the only way to defeat Wetiko is to find the place inside of yourself which is invulnerable to Wetiko. Learn to laugh at the voices of hopelessness, despair, and temptation. They are not true unless you believe in them. And so of course, the only way to, have our strength is the name that saves, Jesus Christ, and to be under his authority. So this is by Makia Freeman, guest author, Humans Are Free, by Alexander Light, Creative Commons. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.